The morning sun cast long shadows across the forward operating base in Afghanistan's Helmand province. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez finished checking her Barrett M82 sniper rifle for the third time, running her fingers along the cold metal barrel. The weapon had been her companion through 18 months of deployment, and today would test their partnership like never before. Intelligence reports had been flooding in for weeks about a high-value target moving through the valley. Ahmad Hassan, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks on coalition forces, had been ghost-like in his movements. Every time they thought they had him cornered, he vanished into the mountainous terrain like smoke. Rodriguez had grown up in East Los Angeles, where the sound of gunfire was as common as traffic noise. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her to shoot when she was 12 years old. What started as weekend trips to the desert became a passion that eventually led her to the military. She never imagined those early lessons would prepare her for moments like this. The briefing room was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Captain Thompson, a weathered officer with 20 years of experience, stood before a detailed topographical map. Red pins marked enemy positions, while blue indicated friendly forces. The valley looked like a chessboard where one wrong move could cost lives. Intelligence suggests Hassan will be moving through grid reference 245 to 678 sometime between 1400 and 1600 hours, Thompson explained, his finger tracing the suspected route. The terrain offers multiple escape routes, so timing will be critical. We'll have a narrow window to engage. Rodriguez studied the map carefully. The valley was approximately 2 kilometers wide, with dense vegetation providing natural cover. Several small villages dotted the landscape, complicating any engagement due to civilian presence. The mission would require precision not just in shooting, but in target identification. The SEAL team assigned to the operation was led by Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, a quiet professional who had earned his reputation in Iraq. His team included Rodriguez as the designated marksman, along with 4 other operators specializing in reconnaissance and close-quarters combat. Each member had been carefully selected for this specific mission. Equipment checks began immediately after the briefing. Rodriguez disassembled her rifle completely, inspecting each component for wear or damage. The Barrett M82 was capable of engaging targets at distances exceeding 1,500 meters, but environmental factors like wind, humidity, and altitude could affect bullet trajectory significantly. Her spotter, Corporal Davis, was a young Marine from Texas who had proven himself reliable under pressure. Together, they had successfully completed 17 confirmed kills during their deployment. Davis understood Rodriguez's shooting patterns and could read environmental conditions with remarkable accuracy. The weather forecast called for light winds from the southwest, with temperatures reaching 95 degrees Fahrenheit. These conditions would create heat mirages that could distort visual targeting at long distances. Rodriguez made mental calculations for wind drift and temperature effects on bullet velocity. As afternoon approached, the team conducted final communications checks. Each operator carried encrypted radios that would allow real-time coordination during the mission. Backup communication systems included visual signals and predetermined rally points in case electronic systems failed. The helicopter insertion would place them 3 kilometers from the target area. From there, they would move on foot through terrain that offered concealment, but also presented navigation challenges. Satellite imagery showed recent enemy activity in the region, including improvised explosive device placements along known travel routes. Rodriguez packed her gear methodically. Beyond the primary weapon, she carried a sidearm, extra ammunition, water, medical supplies, and specialized optical equipment. Every item had been tested and retested to ensure reliability. Weight distribution was critical for the long approach march ahead. The psychology of long-range shooting required mental preparation as much as physical readiness. Rodriguez spent time visualizing potential scenarios, including target identification challenges and environmental factors. She had learned early in her career that successful sniping was 90% mental preparation and 10% trigger pull. Intelligence updates continued arriving until departure time. Hassan's convoy had been spotted moving north through mountain passes, confirming the predicted timeline. However, reports also indicated increased enemy patrol activity in the target area, suggesting possible security awareness. The team's insertion helicopter was a modified Black Hawk equipped with additional armor and defensive systems. As they lifted off from the base, Rodriguez watched the landscape change from military installations to rugged wilderness. The transition always reminded her why she chose this profession. During the flight, Lieutenant Commander Sullivan reviewed contingency plans. Multiple extraction points had been identified in case the primary landing zone became compromised. The mission timeline allowed for flexibility, but extended operations would increase exposure to enemy detection. Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time as they approached the insertion point. Her rifle scope had been zeroed for the expected engagement distance, and she carried range cards with detailed ballistic information. The margin for error at 1,500 meters was measured in inches, not feet. The helicopter touched down in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. Within seconds, the team was moving toward their objective, the aircraft disappearing back toward base. The mission clock had started, and every minute brought them closer to the moment that would define their deployment. As they began their approach march, Rodriguez felt the familiar combination of excitement and focus that preceded high-stakes operations. Somewhere ahead, in terrain she had studied but never seen, waited a target that represented months of intelligence gathering and planning. The real test was about to begin. The team moved through the Afghan countryside with practiced silence, each step calculated to avoid detection. Rodriguez carried her rifle at the ready, scanning the terrain ahead while maintaining awareness of her teammates' positions. The ground beneath their feet alternated between rocky outcroppings and loose soil that could betray their movement with unexpected noise. Corporal Davis walked beside Rodriguez, constantly checking wind direction and atmospheric conditions. His weather instruments showed consistent southwest winds at 8 miles per hour, with humidity levels that would affect long-range accuracy. These readings would be critical when the time came to make the shot. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan led from the front, using hand signals to communicate direction changes and potential threats. His experience in similar terrain had taught him to recognize signs of enemy activity, from disturbed vegetation to unusual animal behavior. Today, the landscape appeared deceptively peaceful. The first checkpoint came after 90 minutes of movement. The team took cover behind a ridge overlooking the target valley. Rodriguez set up her spotting scope to conduct initial reconnaissance of the area where Hassan was expected to appear. The distance measurement confirmed 1,487 meters to the primary engagement zone. Through her scope, Rodriguez could see the valley floor clearly. Several dirt roads intersected near a small bridge, creating natural choke points where vehicles would be forced to slow down. Dense grass and scattered trees provided concealment options, but also created potential hiding places for enemy forces. Davis began recording environmental data in detail. Temperature had risen to 97 degrees, creating visible heat distortion at longer ranges. Wind speed remained steady, but direction had shifted slightly more toward the west. These changes would require adjustments to Rodriguez's scope settings. The team's radio operator, Petty Officer Martinez, established communication with base headquarters. Status reports would be transmitted every 30 minutes unless tactical situations required radio silence. Intelligence updates indicated Hassan's convoy was still moving toward their position on schedule. Rodriguez studied the terrain through her rifle scope, identifying specific landmarks for range estimation. A lone tree at 1,200 meters would serve as a reference point, while a small building at 1,650 meters provided a maximum range marker. These reference points would allow quick target acquisition when the time came. The psychological pressure of long-range shooting began building as they waited. Rodriguez had made shots at this distance before, but never with such high stakes. Hassan represented months of intelligence work and planning. Missing this opportunity could mean losing him permanently in the vast Afghan wilderness. Sullivan positioned the other team members to provide security and backup communication links. Each operator had specific responsibilities in case the mission went wrong. Escape routes had been predetermined, with rally points identified at various distances from their current position. A distant sound made everyone freeze, the faint rumble of vehicle engines approaching from the north. Martinez immediately radioed the information back to base, while Rodriguez adjusted her scope to scan the northern approach roads. The convoy was arriving earlier than expected, compressing their preparation timeline. Through the heat haze, 3 vehicles became visible, moving slowly along the dirt road. The lead vehicle was a pickup truck with several armed men in the back, followed by a sedan that likely carried Hassan, and another pickup truck providing rear security. The convoy's spacing suggested professional security awareness. Rodriguez calculated wind drift and bullet drop for the 1,487-meter shot. At this distance, a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind would push the bullet approximately 14 inches off target. Current conditions required compensation of approximately 8 inches to the left of the intended point of impact. Davis confirmed range and environmental readings while Rodriguez made final scope adjustments. The Barrett M82's .50 caliber round would have a flight time of approximately 1.8 seconds to target. During that time, a moving vehicle could travel several feet, requiring careful prediction of target movement. The convoy stopped at the bridge, apparently conducting security checks before proceeding. This pause provided an opportunity for detailed observation through the rifle scope. Rodriguez could see individual figures moving around the vehicles, but positive identification of Hassan remained impossible at this distance. Radio traffic increased as intelligence analysts at base attempted to confirm Hassan's presence in the convoy. Visual identification would ultimately depend on Rodriguez's ability to distinguish the target when he presented himself. The mission's success balanced on split-second recognition and perfect shot execution. Minutes passed like hours as the convoy remained stationary. Rodriguez controlled her breathing and heart rate, techniques learned through years of training and combat experience. The rifle's bipod was solidly positioned, with her body aligned to minimize movement during the shot sequence. Sullivan used binoculars to observe the convoy's security posture. The armed men appeared alert but not panicked, suggesting they weren't aware of the SEAL team's presence. However, prolonged exposure in the open valley increased the risk of detection by enemy patrols or surveillance. The convoy began moving again, approaching the area where intelligence predicted Hassan would dismount. Rodriguez tracked the lead vehicle through her scope, while Davis provided continuous wind and distance updates. Every element of the shot was being calculated and recalculated in real time. Temperature continued rising, now reaching 99 degrees, and creating increasingly difficult mirage effects. These optical distortions made precise aiming challenging at extreme distances. Rodriguez had trained extensively in these conditions, but each shot remained unique in its specific challenges. The sedan in the convoy's center suddenly pulled ahead of the lead vehicle, suggesting a change in planned movement. This deviation from expected behavior indicated possible security concerns or schedule modifications. The team had to adapt quickly to the evolving tactical situation. Rodriguez maintained focus on the sedan while tracking its movement through her scope. Inside that vehicle was potentially one of the most wanted Taliban commanders in the region. The opportunity they had planned and trained for was approaching rapidly, but success would depend on perfect execution of every element. The convoy reached the predetermined engagement area and slowed considerably. Dust clouds from the vehicles created additional visual obstacles, but also provided concealment for the SEAL team's position. Rodriguez prepared for target identification while maintaining steady aim on the general target area. Davis whispered final environmental readings as the moment of truth approached. Everything they had trained for, all the planning and preparation, would be tested in the next few minutes. Rodriguez felt the familiar calm that preceded her most important shots, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. The convoy came to a complete stop near the bridge, with armed guards immediately establishing a security perimeter. Rodriguez watched through her scope as figures emerged from the vehicles, her finger resting lightly on the rifle's trigger guard. Years of training had taught her to remain calm in these critical moments. Davis whispered range confirmation, distance holding steady at 1,487 meters, wind southeast at 9 miles per hour. His voice was barely audible, but Rodriguez heard every word clearly. Environmental conditions remained within acceptable parameters for a precision shot at extreme range. Through the rifle scope's powerful magnification, Rodriguez could distinguish individual features of the men near the convoy. Most wore traditional Afghan clothing, but several carried modern weapons and moved with military precision. These were not typical Taliban foot soldiers, but trained fighters with combat experience. A tall figure stepped out of the sedan's rear door, immediately recognizable from intelligence photographs as Ahmad Hassan. He wore a distinctive white turban and carried himself with the confidence of a leader. Rodriguez felt her heart rate increase slightly as the primary target finally appeared. Hassan walked toward the bridge while gesturing to his security team. He appeared to be conducting some type of inspection or meeting, moving deliberately rather than rushing. This behavior provided the stability needed for a long-range engagement, but also increased exposure time for the SEAL team. Sullivan observed the target area through binoculars while coordinating with base headquarters via radio. Confirmation of Hassan's identity came through the encrypted communication system within seconds. The authorization to engage was clear and unambiguous. Take the shot when conditions allowed. Rodriguez adjusted her scope's reticle to compensate for the calculated wind drift and bullet drop. At 1,487 meters, the .50 caliber round would drop approximately 38 inches below the line of sight. Environmental factors required additional compensation of 8 inches left for wind drift. The psychological pressure of the moment was intense, but Rodriguez had experienced similar situations before. Her training included extensive work on controlling stress responses during critical shots. Breathing techniques and mental focus helped maintain the steadiness required for precision shooting. Hassan stopped near the bridge's center, apparently examining something on the structure itself. This pause provided an ideal shooting opportunity, with the target stationary and clearly visible. Rodriguez began her shooting sequence, controlling her breathing and aligning the crosshairs precisely. Davis provided final confirmation. Target stationary, range 1,487, wind steady at 9 miles per hour southeast. The environmental conditions were as good as they would get for a shot at this extreme distance. Rodriguez made microscopic adjustments to her aim point. The Barrett M82 safety was already off, with a round chambered and ready to fire. Rodriguez had performed this sequence hundreds of times in training, but the reality of combat always added unpredictable elements. Muscle memory and training took over as she prepared to engage. Through the scope, Hassan appeared larger than life despite the extreme distance. Rodriguez could see details of his clothing and equipment, making the target seem almost close enough to touch. This optical illusion was common in long-range shooting, but could be distracting if not properly managed. Other figures moved around Hassan, but none blocked the clear shooting lane. Rodriguez tracked the target's movement patterns, looking for the moment when he would be most vulnerable. Patience was critical in sniper operations. Rushing a shot at this distance almost guaranteed a miss. The convoy security team maintained their positions but showed no signs of detecting the SEAL team's presence. This concealment was critical for mission success and extraction. Discovery would trigger a firefight that would complicate the primary objective and endanger team members. Rodriguez felt the rifle's familiar weight and balance as she prepared to fire. The weapon had been zeroed specifically for these conditions, with all calculations verified multiple times. Her confidence in the equipment was absolute, leaving only human factors as variables in the equation. Hassan gestured towards something beyond the bridge, pointing in a direction that would briefly expose his profile to Rodriguez's position. This movement created the perfect opportunity for engagement, a stationary target with maximum exposure and clear identification. The crosshairs settled on Hassan's center mass as Rodriguez controlled her breathing rhythm. Military snipers are trained to fire during the natural pause between exhale and inhale when body movement is minimized. This technique required perfect timing and muscle control. Davis held his breath as Rodriguez entered the final phase of her shooting sequence. Years of partnership had taught him to recognize the subtle signs that preceded her shots. His job now was to observe the impact and provide immediate feedback for any follow-up engagement. The valley was remarkably quiet except for distant conversation from Hassan's security team. Wind conditions remained stable, with no sudden gusts that would affect bullet trajectory. Environmental factors aligned perfectly for the precision shot that would end months of pursuit. Rodriguez applied gradual pressure to the trigger, following the smooth, straight-back motion taught in sniper school. The Barrett M82's trigger had been adjusted to break cleanly at exactly 4 pounds of pressure. Too much pressure or incorrect finger placement would pull the shot off target. Hassan turned slightly, presenting a perfect profile view that maximized target exposure. This was the moment Rodriguez had been preparing for since the mission began. All calculations were complete, environmental factors accounted for, and target identification confirmed. The shot sequence entered its final phase. The rifle scope showed Hassan clearly against the bridge's concrete background. Rodriguez's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm as her finger applied final pressure to the trigger. Years of training, months of preparation, and hours of stalking culminated in this single moment. Time seemed to slow as Rodriguez completed her trigger pull. The massive .50 caliber rifle would fire within the next second, sending a 750-grain bullet across nearly 1,500 meters of Afghan valley. Success or failure would be determined by the precision of calculations and the steadiness of execution. The target remained perfectly positioned as Rodriguez reached the trigger's breaking point. Hassan stood motionless on the bridge, unaware that his fate was being decided from a ridge nearly a mile away. The convergence of technology, training, and human skill was about to determine the mission's outcome. The Barrett M82 erupted with tremendous force, sending its massive projectile across the valley toward the target. Rodriguez felt the familiar recoil as the rifle's muzzle brake redirected gases to control the weapon's movement. Through her scope, she tracked the bullet's path while maintaining sight picture for possible follow-up shots. Davis immediately began scanning the target area for impact assessment. The 1.8-second flight time felt like an eternity as they waited to confirm the shot's effectiveness. Hassan had been clearly visible when the trigger broke, but target movement during bullet flight could affect the final outcome. The projectile struck exactly where Rodriguez had aimed, but Hassan was no longer there. In the split second before impact, he had stepped behind one of his security guards, who took the devastating hit instead. The .50 caliber round eliminated the bodyguard instantly, but the primary target remained unharmed. Chaos erupted around the convoy as Hassan's security team reacted to the sniper attack. Armed men scattered for cover while others tried to locate the shooter's position. Radio chatter increased dramatically as the Taliban forces attempted to coordinate their response to the unexpected assault. Rodriguez quickly chambered another round while Davis adjusted range calculations. Hassan had moved toward the sedan, seeking cover behind the vehicle's armored body. The new position required different compensation for angle and distance, complicating the follow-up shot significantly. Sullivan immediately radioed base headquarters with a situation report. The convoy was alerted to their presence, transforming a covert operation into an active combat engagement. Extraction procedures would need to be accelerated before enemy reinforcements could respond to the contact. Through her scope, Rodriguez could see Hassan moving quickly between vehicles, using his security team as human shields. His survival instincts and tactical awareness were clearly superior to intelligence estimates. This was not the typical Taliban commander they had expected to encounter. The convoy's security team began deploying in formation around the bridge area. Several fighters moved into positions that would allow them to observe the surrounding ridgelines. Discovery of the SEAL team's location was becoming increasingly likely with each passing minute. Martinez reported increased radio traffic on Taliban frequencies, indicating that Hassan's forces were calling for reinforcements. Intelligence intercepts suggested that additional fighters were en route from nearby villages. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Rodriguez maintained her aim on the sedan while waiting for Hassan to expose himself again. The vehicle's armor would stop most small arms fire, but the Barrett's .50 caliber round could penetrate light armor at this range. However, she needed a clear shot to ensure target elimination. Davis spotted movement in the tall grass near the convoy's position. Someone was moving through the vegetation in a way that suggested military training rather than panic. This unknown factor added another complication to an already complex tactical situation. The figure in the grass emerged suddenly, carrying what appeared to be an automatic weapon. However, instead of joining Hassan's security team, this person began firing at the Taliban fighters. The unexpected development completely changed the battlefield dynamics. Rodriguez realized they were observing a female fighter engaging Hassan's forces with precision and tactical skill. The woman wore civilian clothing but moved with professional competence. Her appearance from concealment suggested she had been tracking the convoy independently. The mystery fighter's intervention created opportunities and complications simultaneously. Hassan's security team was now dealing with threats from multiple directions, but the additional combatant made target identification more difficult. Friend or foe determination became critical. Sullivan attempted to establish radio contact with the unknown fighter, but received no response. Her identity and motivation remained unclear, though her actions suggested opposition to Hassan's forces. The SEAL team faced a decision about whether to coordinate or maintain independent operations. Hassan used the confusion to move toward better cover near a small building beyond the bridge. This movement took him further from Rodriguez's optimal shooting position and closer to escape routes leading into the mountains. The window for engagement was closing rapidly. The female fighter continued her assault on Hassan's security team with remarkable effectiveness. Her weapon appeared to be a modified AK-74 with optical sights, and she was using it with considerable skill. Several of Hassan's men had already been neutralized by her accurate fire. Rodriguez adjusted her scope to track Hassan's movement toward the building. The new angle required significant compensation changes, and environmental factors were becoming more challenging as heat distortion increased. The shot would be more difficult than the original engagement. Davis provided updated range and environmental data. Distance now 1,620 meters, wind shifting to southwest at 12 miles per hour. The increased range and changing wind conditions pushed the engagement to the edge of practical accuracy limits for the Barrett rifle system. The unknown fighter suddenly changed position, moving closer to Hassan's location while maintaining fire on his security team. Her tactical movement suggested special operations training, but her identity remained mysterious. The SEAL team watched her advance with professional admiration and growing curiosity. Hassan reached the building and took cover behind its stone walls. From Rodriguez's position, only small portions of the target were visible when he moved between windows. These brief exposures would require perfect timing and exceptional marksmanship to engage successfully. The female fighter continued her methodical assault on the remaining security team members. Her ammunition supply appeared limited, as she was making every shot count. This conservation suggested experience in sustained combat operations where resupply was not available. Martinez intercepted radio communications indicating that Hassan was calling for immediate extraction. Helicopter assets were reportedly en route to his location, which would complicate any ground-based engagement. The timeline for mission completion was becoming increasingly compressed. Rodriguez prepared for a shot at Hassan as he moved between windows in the building. The extreme range and limited target exposure made this one of the most challenging shots of her career. Environmental factors continued to worsen as afternoon temperatures peaked. The mysterious fighter suddenly ceased fire and began moving toward the building where Hassan had taken cover. Her approach was tactically sound, using available cover and concealment effectively. The SEAL team realized she was attempting to close with the target for direct engagement. Sullivan made a command decision to support the unknown fighter's assault. While her identity remained unclear, her objective appeared aligned with their mission. The team prepared to provide overwatch and fire support for her advance on Hassan's position. Rodriguez maintained her scope focus on the building while preparing to engage any threats that might interfere with the female fighter's approach. The tactical situation had evolved into something completely unexpected, but the primary objective remained unchanged: eliminate Hassan before he could escape. The sound of approaching helicopters became audible in the distance. Hassan's extraction was imminent, and time was running out for all parties involved. The next few minutes would determine whether months of planning and pursuit would end in success or failure.